Welcome to Green Living with Tea. We are talking about gut microbiome, and balancing the gut microbiome can transform the entire terrain of the body by regulating the immune system, controlling inflammation, influencing metabolism, and affecting brain function by way of the gut-brain axis, all of which are crucial in the prevention and potential reversal of chronic illnesses. And we are talking with Martha Carlin today about the gut hormone connection every midlife woman should know. Martha is a pioneering citizen scientist and systems researcher who has spent the past decade unraveling the hidden connections between the microbiome, chronic disease, and environmental toxins. And after her husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, Martha left a successful corporate career to investigate the deeper causes of neurodegeneration and metabolic dysfunction, starting in the gut. And she is a founder and CEO of BioCollective, a groundbreaking microbiome research company that has collaborated with leading institutions, including CalTech, University of Chicago, University College Cork, and her team has developed the BioFlux, a metabolic modeling system, and Sugar Shift, a patented probiotic clinically shown to reduce endotoxin and improve insulin resistance and microbiome diversity. And there's much more to her bio that will be in the show notes. But for now, I want to introduce Martha Carlin.
Thanks for having me, T. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you too, because you've done a lot of research and over 1,000 studies, if I remember when I studied your bio a little bit further. But I know we gave a little bit about your background, but how did you get to where you are today? Is this something you went to college for, or was this something just truly from when your husband was diagnosed with Parkinson?
I mean, it truly is from a passion to learn and understand the underlying causes of disease. Which if you look at our medical system today, there's very little true in-depth research into trying to understand what is causing all these chronic diseases. So I actually studied accounting in college, which is a system that has to balance.
Right.
I came out of school and was trained as an auditor for a large accounting firm. And that training is never believe anything that somebody tells you, examine the evidence for yourself,
Interesting.
which is
Yes.
great training. And then they also trained us in a way to look for business risk, which was basically doing flow charts, mapping out everything that flows through the system and who touches it. And in 2002, my 44-year-old marathon running, healthy looking husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I'm like, how does a young person get an old person's disease? And you're in the doctor's office and they basically tell you you have a progressive neurodegenerative disease and you can't really stop that progression, but here's a pill that will maybe make you feel a little better. But the pills don't even work for that many years. So, you know, you're kind of left with this big bomb in your lap. And because I had a background in kind of looking through business to find the problems, I said, I think I can apply this whole systems-based approach to trying to understand the underlying causes of Parkinson's. And through that, found my way 10 years later to the microbiome. And then, founding a company to start looking into the microbiome, not just in Parkinson's, but across the population, because as it was becoming, so there was something called the Human Microbiome Project that finished in 2012, I think. And that was this large multi institution study on all the different microbiomes in the human body. And so it's just people were just starting to become aware of that term and the fact that we are more microbial than we are human. So maybe two-thirds microbial cells and one-third human cells. And that these microbes are doing a lot of the work of producing vitamins, hormones, neurotransmitters, and moving things around in the body and detoxifying and all of that. So I've founded the BioCollective and started basically collecting poop samples and combing through the data. And that sort of led me down the path of trying to figure out, okay, how can we solve these problems of functions that we've lost because we're exposed to so many toxic things in the environment that are killing the microbiome, but it's, not just in our gut, it's also out in the soil. And so I have the BioCollective that did the fecal sample collection and all the research around that. And then we founded a brand of human probiotics called BioQuest and have done clinical research around one of those formulas. And then also am a co-founder of a company called Ancient Organics that is making soil microbial consortia or teams of microbes to clean up the toxins in the soil like glyphosate and hydrocarbons and other things in this that are disrupting the soil microbiome that makes our plants healthy and by virtue of a healthy plant downstream animals and humans that are healthier.
It's fascinating to me, and there's a couple things in here I want to just get back to. For somebody that's listening that might not even know what a microbiome is, can you explain that?
So the microbiome is the trillions of bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in and on our body. And it functions as our internal pharmacy to maintain our health when things are in balance. But when things aren't in balance, often some of the pathogenic species can become more dominant. And that's where we get into trouble. But for the larger part, with a healthy, balanced microbiome, those microbes that are in and on our body are really essential to our life.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming more popular in the news these days about your gut health and your microbiome, but I still think a lot of people, and even people friends I talk to, still don't have a clear concept of how important it is to our overall health. And one other thing I just want to touch on. So you studied the feces of, I think it was it 1,000 different
About a
people?
thousand. Yeah.
Fascinating. And was that primarily people with Parkinson's?
It was not, although that was our largest cohort.
Okay.
We had about 80 people with Parkinson's. We had our next largest cohort was people with autoimmune disease. We
Mm.
had a small cohort with autism. We had a segment of people who were healthy, although I would say from looking at the microbiome data over time that I'm not sure there's anyone today that has a fully healthy microbiome just because of what daily life is exposing us to and how that alters our microbiome. And the fact that most of us alive today have grown up in the age of antibiotics. And that's actually how I got down the microbiome path in the first place, a book by Dr. Martin Blazer called Missing Microbes. And he's an infectious disease doctor, but he had started to see this connection between growing up in the age of antibiotics and the loss of this microbiome and the rise of chronic disease because, the microbiome is so important to producing um, healthy metabolism and our B vitamins and vitamin K, like all of these things that help us be healthy. We're bombarding from actually from the point of birth. I didn't even realize when I started talking to my OB about the microbiome right after I founded the company. And, I made some comment about cesarean birth and antibiotics. And she said, "Oh, we give all babies antibiotics as soon as they're born." I was like, "What?" you know,
Crazy.
even the word anti-life, biotic is life, anti-life. It's kind of crazy.
It is crazy. And that's how most doctors and OBs are trained, is what I've learned by the pharmaceutical industry, what to give them, unfortunately. And majority of doctors are not trained in preventative care. They're trained in giving you some type of medicine,
Yeah.
pharmaceutical drug. And unfortunately, that's something that is just too common these days. And of course, it's affecting our microbiome as well. There's so many different subjects you and I could probably talk about where the microbiome, and we could talk about cancer, we could talk about Parkinson's, but today we're talking about hormone health and women's health and gut health. And as a woman that is listening here today, which is the majority of my audience, not all of them, but what are some things women should look for in their daily life? Any triggers that, signs that they should be on the lookout?
Well, so kind of back to what that microbiome is doing. If it is out of balance, part of the whole process of elimination in the body is through your stool. You're eliminating estrogen that's been used. So constipation or bloating or any type of changes in your bowel habits can be an indication of disruption in the microbiome and disruption of that um, estrogen cycling. Because if you are constipated or you have problems in your gut, what can happen is you get elevated species of bacteria
Hmm.
that um, are recycling the estrogen instead of eliminating that used estrogen. So that can cause problems that people aren't necessarily aware of. And it is really critical. One of the in one of the European studies that was similar to the Human Microbiome Project here, they actually found that bowel regularity and the consistency of your stool, there's something called the Bristol stool scale that measures basically the hardness or softness of the stool. Anyway, that your stool regularity and consistency of your stool was the number 3 predictor of long-term health.
Hmm.
And so that is strongly implicated in how hormones are handled and recycled in the body. And then in the gut microbiome, in the bacteria themselves, many of the so there are 3 aromatic amino acids: tyrosine, tryptophan, and phenylalanine. And those are produced in plants or in bacteria through something called the shikimate pathway. And that is disrupted by the herbicide glyphosate,
Hmm.
which is widely prevalent in the food supply. And those hormones are involved, I mean, those aromatic amino acids are involved in things like serotonin production, melatonin production. So many of these, and even your thyroid hormones. So much of what we are seeing in women today, and I think it's less diagnosed in men, but I think there are also hormonal problems in men that tie back to this disruption in the gut microbiome.
So somebody might be thinking, so glyphosate, so is it because of what I eat? Should I be eating all organic? Should I be avoiding anything that's sprayed with pesticides that would be affecting my microbiome?
So that is one of the large contributors to disruption of our microbiome because it's actually even been patented as an antibiotic. And in the patent information itself, it kills lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, which are those good bacteria that help produce the B vitamins, and bifidobacteria produce something called plasmalogens that are healthy, help the brain. So it's specifically targeting those good bacteria and dropping your bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, and allowing some of the pathogens that are resistant to it, many of those are foodborne, to flourish. And those are toxin producers, which kind of makes a whole loop going. So, yes, ideally, you want to try to eat organic as much as possible. Or if you're going to a local farmer's market, you want to ask the farmer,
Mhm.
what is he using on his product? And one of the things that is not well known by people is if you're eating something that's a dried crop, say, beans, lentils, your grains, so, wheat, barley, oats, many of those are now dried at the end of the growing season to accelerate the harvest, and they are dried by spraying glyphosate on them. So, if you think about maybe glyphosate being sprayed at the beginning, the whole ecosystem has some time to detoxify that. But if it's sprayed at the end, there's no time for the plant to detoxify it. And so you have a higher level of residues. And so I I'm not sure if the environmental working group is a place where you can get all 60 of those crops listed. I have on my plate to write a blog about that. But if you just think about something that is a dried crop, I've actually started calling, and this is a great way for people to take action. If you call the brands that you buy, I mean, I called Bob's Red Mill and said, are your farmers using glyphosate at the end of the growing season to dry down your oats? And the more people who call and raise these issues to the food companies, then the
Yep.
more they're going to press back against how the food is grown.
Okay, does Bob's use glyphosate? Because I buy Bob's organic grains all the time.
So their response was they require their farmers not to use it.
Okay.
They don't do any verification or certification process.
Okay.
But
Okay. I
I
get
do
that. Yeah.
think, for the most part, if a farmer is asked, not to do something uh, in that process, that for the most part they're probably going to comply. And your organic farmers, many of them are already thinking about these things,
Right.
but it's not tested. And there is a group, Moms Across America,
Mm,
that tests a lot of brands and foods, and
yep.
so that's a great place to go. They've done a lot of. I think they showed that actually Cheerios was one of the worst.
Right.
Where we all had our little babies picking up the Cheerios and eating Cheerios, and
Yep.
uh, they've also wine. People don't think about wine,
Mm,
but actually, uh, California has a terrible glyphosate problem, and
yep.
there's a group in Napa now that is looking at a certification that would have the grape growers certify that they're no longer using glyphosate. And that's actually some of the work that we did with our agricultural company, showing we did a study in grapes showing we could remove the glyphosate from the soil, but not only that, we could reduce the glyphosate out of the grape itself.
Yeah, and wine, I'm glad you brought that up because I only drink organic wine or biodynamic wine. Luckily, here in Buffalo, we have a fabulous store called Paradise Wine that supplies only sells organic or sustainable and biodynamic. But I will tell everybody, I'm a true testament of drinking wine. If I do not drink organic wine, I have a headache. I do not feel good the next day. I can tell exactly that I am drinking either glyphosate or all the other pesticides and herbicides that they spray on wine crops. So I'm glad you brought that up. You also brought up Moms Across America. I encourage everybody to go to that website. It's a fabulous resource. In addition to Martha mentioned Environmental Working Group, which is ewg.org, another great resource. It's been around for a long time. So I just wanted to mention those three things that you brought up because I think they're great resources for people. And glyphosate, just for everybody's knowledge, it is the primary ingredient in Roundup. So if you're using Roundup on your lawn, I encourage you never to use Roundup again. And hopefully soon that will be banned. And I think there's something coming up in the next couple of years where that might be banned. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Martha.
It is being removed from consumer purchase at the store, but what I will say is often when that happens, they actually will put in place
Replace
a
it.
more toxic
Yeah.
placement. So, and the other thing I'll say about Roundup and the glyphosate-based herbicides, and this really holds beyond the glyphosate-based herbicides, one of the most toxic chemicals to not only our microbiome, but also the cellular structure of our body is what are called quaternary ammonium compounds or surfactants that are in cleaners. And I have been fortunate for the last 3 years to be working with a scientist in Australia, Dr. Barry Ninham, who was the pioneer in showing that these quaternary compounds are actually immunosuppressant. And the way they're typically studied, it's not readily apparent because you're exposed to them, it attaches to a membrane. It takes about 3 months for it to flip from one side of the membrane to the other. And when that happens, it becomes immunosuppressant because the cell can no longer recognize the danger signals, I'll say. And it takes about 9 months for your body to eliminate it because, our cells are turning over all the time. But if you are constantly being exposed to these quaternary compounds, then it's accumulating in your body. And you know, so they're a component in the herbicides to get them to stick to the leaves of the plant. But more dangerous to us, I would say, is in our household cleaners. So the dish soap on the countertop, the shampoo in the shower, the laundry detergent, all of those things are really quite problematic. And of course, for the last 5 years from COVID, we're doused everywhere we go with these antibacterial cleaners. And for the most part, those are going to be quaternary compounds that are immunosuppressant.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm glad you brought that up because one of the biggest things I help people change in their homes to get rid of some of these toxic chemicals and reduce their toxic overload is cleaning supplies. And just as you said, and laundry detergents and anything else that you use in your home or on your body. So I'm glad that you brought that up. There are so many environmental toxins out there. We can only do our best to remove as many as possible because it's impossible to avoid them once you walk out your door. But as you said, we have choices. We have choices to make that can help regulate our hormones and not interfere with our microbiome so much. It's something that as a woman, we should be watching everything we put in our body and on our body to help reduce our exposure to these chemicals at home. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I mean, I do like you don't want to make people like terrified to live.
Right, of course.
I think if we just make mindful choices and become more aware, and then
Yeah.
we support a healthy microbiome that can help us detoxify, and we're just aware of what's around us and what we're being exposed to. We don't have to be terrified to live, but we should be making mindful choices.
Yes, I agree. What about how does it affect the hormone regulation?
Well, so some of them mimic hormones. So
Mhm.
you have a lot of things that you're exposed to on a daily basis that are called estrogen mimics. And that's, I think, in the plastics, the phthalates, and some of
Right.
those for sure. There are even pesticides that mimic hormones. So that's one of the hormone disruptors. And then the specific just killing of the microbes, or occupying, I'll say, occupying microbes with a detoxification process, then keeps them from being able to do another job that they could do, whether that's, making a precursor to a hormone, or, making a vitamin.
So a lot of women I hear are having trouble sleeping, or they're feel like they're tired all the time. And of course, I'm 62, so I hear about weight fluctuation, brain fog. What can women do to help with these symptoms as related to the gut related?
So, kind of back to the bacteria producing the precursors for serotonin and melatonin, which are so important for sleep, and tyrosine, which is important for energy. Um, those amino acids, again, are disrupted by glyphosate. So, back to thinking about eating organic and clean food and supporting a microbiome that can help us with the production of those aromatic amino acids and the downstream metabolites. We actually, so in our probiotic formulas, that's one of the things that we looked at, is people have disrupted sleep. And so we have a product called Simple Slumber that supports the microbiome's production of bacteria. Make melatonin, they make tryptophan, uh, that is, involved in sleep hormone production. And so we have a formula that actually works as a team to support that bacterial melatonin production and tryptophan production for about 7 hours to give you a solid night's sleep.
Wow, interesting. So we can do our best to avoid toxins, do our best to eat organic food, do our best to avoid glyphosate. But the good thing is that you have this product, a product line called BioQuest. Is that how it's pronounced?
Biotic Quest.
BioQuest. Okay. And
Pardon.
yeah, I was checking it out. I was fascinated by it because um, I mean, we can only do so much, but your product really can help a lot. Make changes, but the products. I mean, I know you have different ones in the series of the line, but explain it a little bit further because I was fascinated by it.
So, if you go to the store and you look at the shelf, there's rows and rows and rows of probiotics. And if you just kind of look at the ingredients on those, most of them are coming from just three suppliers, so there's not a lot of variety, the same three suppliers. And um, they're not necessarily formulated for a specific function. We're actually the only probiotic company that builds a team of microbes. So if you think about, if you had a car factory and you want to produce a car at the end of the day, you have to have people with different skill sets on the line doing those different functions. And so we actually have a computer model using a huge data set of the genomes of different organisms. And we have a bank of our own bacteria. And we put those teams together that can build that car at the end. So, our best selling formula is called Sugar Shift. And, the car that we're building there, we're converting sugars, glucose and fructose, that we get too much of in our um, kind of modern food system. It converts those into mannitol, which we don't use, but is food for a healthier uh, profile of gut microbiome. And so we studied that clinically in a diabetes cohort. It improved insulin resistance, lowered endotoxin, kind of shifted the whole microbiome back to a healthier state, anaerobic, um, because we put that team in that was restoring a function that had been lost. So, same thing with sleep. You look at, okay, what's going on? Tryptophan metabolism is disrupted. You've lost some of the key microbes that can help you produce serotonin. And I think 80% of our serotonin is made in the gut. So we put back a team that, again, on that factory line is producing what you need for quality sleep. We have an immune product called Ideal Immunity. That one is producing very specific targeted metabolites that kill foodborne pathogens like salmonella, listeria, E. coli, all of that. So, um, you know, great for taking if you eat out a lot, if foreign travel, or, you just kind of get an icky stomach. I have actually a doctor in Hawaii who got something from a patient, and he had had chronic diarrhea for over 40 years until
Oh
he found
gosh.
our ideal immunity, and it kind of turned his life around. So, if you're suffering from chronic diarrhea, it can be that you've got some kind of a foodborne pathogen or something that's in your gut, and this can potentially help you get rid of that. Our newest product is one called Perfect Peace, which I think everybody in the world today could use a little peace, and
Sure.
designed to help the body and the microbiome produce those calming neurotransmitters, GABA, and restore kind of that sense of calm and peace. And, we have some tracker data from a Whoop that shows, within about 20 minutes that stress score dropping down and producing calm. We have one for heart, and then we actually have a kind of a niche group of people who make yogurts from our formulas.
Mm.
So we make them from the capsules, but we actually started making a sugar shift yogurt starter uh, for people who want to make home yogurt, either with dairy or non-dairy milks.
Now, if somebody wants to take the one for sleep, can they also take the any of the other ones combined
You
or?
can, but we do recommend that you take them about an hour apart from each other,
Oh, okay.
because they're designed as a team. So it would kind of be like if you had a shift that was making a Corvette and then you had a shift that was going to make a truck. You want to make enough time for the line to change,
Yep.
if
I
that
love it.
makes
I love
sense.
totally. I love the analogy for sure. Yeah, I was fascinated by the product. I'm definitely going to order some, and I think it would be a great thing to have. One other thing I wanted to mention is water and how the amount of chemicals and things in our water system. I'm a big advocate for reverse osmosis, which gets out the majority of the chemicals, but that's where a lot of the glyphosate, that's where a lot of the antibiotics end up in our water system. And I didn't know how you felt about that.
That's actually when people get sort of overwhelmed by the information I share. Sometimes they ask me,
Yeah.
like, what is one thing that I can do?
Mm,
Say, the one thing you can do is change your water supply. If you're drinking tap water, if you go out to a restaurant and you're just drinking the water at the table, do not do it. There are thousands of chemicals in our water supply that are xenobiotic, basically, again, something that the gut has to detoxify.
right.
And, you know, people have no idea. They think that water treatment is taking all this stuff out of the water,
Yeah.
and it doesn't. Water treatment processes are, 100 or so years old, and were designed to deal with bacteria, not
Yeah.
to deal with the chemical load that we have today. So
Right.
even though it may look clear coming out of the faucet, the your neighbor's drugs they're taking, your neighbor's hormones, your like all of that is washing down the drain, and you're drinking it. But the one thing I do, uh, uh, people will often get reverse osmosis, but they don't realize it's also stripping out all the minerals. And so you've got to replace the minerals. We used to, 200 years ago, we were drinking out of the stream where it was rolling over the rocks and the water was
Right.
low in minerals. And so now, when we're filtering the water, we have what's called hungry water and it doesn't have the minerals. So it can steal those minerals from us, which we're already low in. So it's very, very important to make sure that you supplement with minerals if you're using reverse osmosis water, because our cells need minerals and the microbes need minerals to
Mm.
actually do all the functions that they do in our gut.
How do you add the minerals if somebody's questioning that?
So I actually add humic and fulvic minerals to my water. I use a product called Beam Minerals, but I'm I, I'm actually working with somebody now who's looking at my mineral profile, who's a nutritionist
Mhm.
to formulate a specific mineral supplement for me, because that's also kind of a tricky thing, because you look on the market and there's all these different separate minerals or
Sure.
mineral complexes, and some of them are more absorbable than others, and it's kind of a wild west, I'll say.
Yeah, no doubt. I was just curious what you knew about that because I don't add minerals to our diet per se. So I've been thinking about that because we definitely drink a lot of our reverse osmosis water, and I have to start thinking about that now.
Yeah, add minerals.
Yeah, no, I know. I have to look into that. So thank you for that. The anything else that you want to bring up before we talk about where people can find you?
Well, so one of the things I would say that's coming out of the gut that people probably have not heard of is something called endotoxin.
Oh yeah, right. Yep.
And that also ties back to the same bacteria that disrupt estrogen. So many of those estrogen disrupting or recycling microbes are also endotoxin producers. And I'm sure your audience has probably heard of a leaky gut. When you get a
Mhm.
leaky gut, the endotoxin from these what are called gram-negative bacteria in the gut can leak across, and they're highly inflammatory. So a lot of the inflammation and even weight gain can be related to that. So uh, in the scientific literature, they often do studies in animals. There are animal models using endotoxin to induce Parkinson's, diabetes, depression, anxiety, MS, autism. So all of these chronic issues we have today have some tie back to that endotoxin. And so, I think it's really underappreciated. And then there can be endotoxins in the food from these same gram-negative
Mm.
bacteria.
Yes, it's all
Connect.
confusing, but you take one step at a time in trying to regulate your health, your bio microbiome, and as you said, don't take one, make one change here and then slowly, hopefully, you can make other changes. So, because it can be overwhelming, as you mentioned, there's a lot out there for us to really consider regarding our overall health um, and the environmental toxins around us. So, well, thank you. This is so informative. I know we could keep talking. Your knowledge and what you've been through to get to where you are today is fascinating. And where can people find you and buy the product as well?
So people can find me. So our probiotic website is BioticQuest. That's BioTiQuest.com. I also have a Substack called Martha's Quest and a separate Parkinson's blog called Martha's Quest. So if you have anyone that who's dealing with Parkinson's, I write about more specific issues on the Martha's Quest website. And then in the Martha's Quest Substack, I write a lot about different environmental issues that affect beyond Parkinson's that people might not have thought about.
Excellent. Yes, I need those links for the show notes because I didn't have the Substack. I love Substack, so I will add that as well. And then you're also, they also have links I'll put in the show notes on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, as we know, is X, and there's also a LinkedIn profile. So, and I really appreciate your knowledge, information, sharing it with us here today, Martha. And I look forward to connecting with you definitely down the road because you are a wealth of information, and I appreciate you sharing it with us here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome.